Today, I wanted to take a few minutes to talk about the officer-involved death that took place in Minneapolis in my district. When the news broke of the video, the incident was circulated, and the world watched the horrific images of George Floyd pleading for his life while being held down by a Minneapolis police officer. I was both speechless and outraged at the same time. Not only as a state senator representing that part of Minneapolis, but as a community member, as a Black man in America, and as a father. In Minnesota, we often talk about our shared values and caring for our neighbors. I think many, if not all of us, would agree that every Minnesotan should feel safe in their community and in every part of our state and this nation, regardless to what they look like. But the rattling video we saw was a reminder that we have a long ways to go and a lot of work ahead to make that a reality. This tragedy has left our entire community in grief. Whether if we personally knew Mr. George Floyd or not, because we're reminded once again of how society unfairly, unjustly discriminates against Black men. The time to act, and always has been now. We cannot wait until the next person falls victim to this type of unjustifiable violence in order to do something. This is why we're going to continue to push the systemic changes that we believe that the legislature should put forth to change. We know that there are many bills that we have talked about and new ones that are being crafted. We cannot continue to have this happen to us. So if it's not already obvious, let me be clear that the legislature has a very critical role to play in this work. And I encourage all of my colleagues not only to engage in this conversation online through press statements, but to listen, to take community input seriously, to introduce and fiercely support legislation that saves lives of our neighbors, community members, and fellow Minnesotans. And for members of the press, that was kind of my prepared statements. And then the events of last night, I was up late last night talking to business owners, community members, the governor, council members in the area, and we are grieving those that have been killed again. We are grieving those communities that are being triggered and re-traumatized. We are grieving for our community, which was literally on fire because of the pain collectively that people have about the senseless murder of George. So I just wanted to add that in because that happened between the time that we scheduled this and this now. So I'm more than willing to take any questions. Just wanted to let you know.
So the first question we have is from Mary Lehane.
Hi, Senator Hayden. Could you let us know, you said you spoke with the governor. Would you like the governor to call a special session and to really get some legislation moving right now and not wait for, the June 12th COVID special session?
Yeah, I do think that, we are working, many of us are working on pieces of legislation that we already had, but in the developing times, I think that we're all working very closely. And so I certainly would support a special session to deal with this issue. Also have spoken with Attorney General Keith Ellison, and I think that there are some ways that we can expedite this. I also just want to say, and just for the record, that I call for the arrest and indictment of those officers that were involved. I would hope that Attorney General Freeman is drawing those papers up today, right now, because if it would have been me or you or anyone else that was videotaped doing what those officers did to the victim, we would be in jail right now.
And Senator Hayden, if I can follow up, have you heard from Senator Gazelka or talked to him about what's happening in your community and the possibility of special session and some legislation to address these issues?
I haven't. I think that this ratcheted up a lot. The victim, Mr. Floyd, obviously I was there. It's 8 blocks from my house. And then as this continues to ratchet up, people are really in pain. I haven't heard from Senator Gazelka directly, though.
Thank you.
The next question is from Theo.
Hi, Senator. If you could address The mayor requested late last night that the governor send in the National Guard. It appears that police have lost control based on what happened last night. Many businesses in your district burned, looters ransacked others. Do you support the mayor's request to call in the Guard?
Well, I haven't talked to the mayor about that directly. I know that the governor's thoughts and my thoughts are we want to create an environment where people can protest, that people can grieve, that people can let us know and let the world know that this is not okay. But we also want people to be safe, and we want people to be protected. And so I think that it is a really complex way of not re-traumatizing the community. The community has been traumatized because of law enforcement. And so continuing to add more and more law enforcement on that may not be the way to go. However, I do want people to be safe. I would say that, the calls for the National Guard should be combined with the calls for communities and community leaders and faith-based leaders to be on the scene to try to help people walk through this process, as well as, and I will say it again, as well as we need to bring these killers to jail. They need to be prosecuted. They need to be in jail, and I think that would give some relief to the community that we're not walking around with officers who open fire or put their boot on the necks of Black men.
To clarify, Senator, do you support the National Guard being sent in, or do you oppose that?
Well, what I support is communities being safe, and I support a conversation that we need to have on what are the resources that we have in our community to help diffuse the situation and allow people to grieve.
Last question from me. Are you concerned that the events of last night overshadow, in some ways, the death of George Floyd itself?
Well, I would hope not. The events of last night is just the outpouring of that. It is the tension. It is the straw that broke the camel's back. So I would hope that we would stay focused on the killing of George Floyd and other Black and brown and indigenous people in this community, and look at someone said today, one of my colleagues, that says that buildings can be rebuilt, businesses can be rebuilt. Not that we wanted them to burn in the first place, but they can be rebuilt. But we can't bring back Mr. Floyd's life.
Next, we have a question from Shannon Lurkey.
You're still muted, Shannon.
Thank you. Can you talk about some of the legislation that you would propose that could potentially stop events like this from happening? And it's been noted that many Minneapolis police officers don't actually live in Minneapolis. Is that something that could help build community? Your comments.
Yeah, there are, things like post-board reform for licensure, making sure that we're doing a much better job vetting when we give licenses to people. There are things like making sure that the Attorney General can step in if county attorneys, for some reason, are waffling or wringing their hands. We can bring the Attorney General in. I think that this conversation about community and how can we bring police officers. Many years ago, Rich Stanek, former Sheriff Stanek, when he was a state rep, really kind of led the inability for us to call for police officers to live in the community. I think that is something that we need to do again. When I was a young man, or a little boy rather, there were a lot of cops that lived in the community. There are football coaches, they were our chess coaches, they were our debate coaches. They lived in the community, and I think they had a lot more respect for the community. So I do think we need to look at that. And then there were liability kind of legislation not long ago that says that, that police officers may need to carry their own liability. So if they do things like this comes out of their pocket. But there seems to be somewhat of a reckless abandon in the way that the police are policing, especially communities like my own and others throughout the city.
Thank you, Senator.
And then we have a question here from John Croman, although I think you touched on this a little bit, Senator, talking about legislation that didn't get through in the past that deserves a second look right now in light of Mr. Floyd's killing.
Yeah, and one of the things that we're doing is we're going to come up with signature piece of legislation. I'm working closely with Senator Champion and other members of the People of Color, Indigenous Caucus, and we plan to put that on the table. So whenever we come back, I think Mary had talked about special session when it happens. We want this to be part of a global agreement. We no longer want it to be that, the Republicans in the Senate won't go along with it, so it won't get done. Oh, we're sorry, Senator Limmer did not hear the bill, so it didn't get vetted. We're tired of that. We need this to be part of, and our team, the Democrats, needed this to be part of the global negotiations. If we want a bonding bill, if we want to get other pieces of legislation that didn't get done this year, we want reform. And we're kind of crafting what we believe is going to be the most impactful right this moment. But we want that reform to be on the table, or we are not going to have business as usual and start passing bonding bills and start passing all the other things that we need. We believe this is critical. We believe that we have to do it now, and we are tired of being in the back of the line.
And now we have a question from Tori Van Noot.
Hi, Senator. In addition to what you were just mentioning, is there any role for the legislature in terms of helping support, rebuilding and repair in the community and neighborhood, whether it's, the bigger box stores that people rely on for food and jobs, or some of the smaller minority-owned businesses that you mentioned? Is there any legislation you're talking about there to help?
This is such a moving process. I think that businesses are going to have to assess. I would imagine the big boxes and other well-established businesses, have some sort of insurance for things like this. I don't want to, speak for them because I don't know. I would like to look at and target the smaller community-based businesses to see if there's an opportunity that we can help. Lake Street has been devastated because of COVID. There were restaurants that were closing. I'm hearing from, people from the Midtown Global Market, the Neighborhood Development Center, and others that are bleeding cash because they can't open. And so we were targeting kind of microloans, our businesses for microloans, our microloans for small businesses. Anyways, I think we can come in and support, but I do think that the larger corporate-owned facilities hopefully have enough reserves or have the necessary insurance to rebuild.
Are there any other questions from anybody? I don't see any hands up or any other questions in the chat. Go ahead, Brian.
Hey, Senator, I know that you said that folks involved in the more violent protests are outpouring because of their frustration over what things have done, but should the people who are actually physically taking things from stores or lighting buildings on fire, should they face any kind of criminal repercussions?
We still have a rule of law. We still don't. We certainly in our community and everybody that I talk, folks that are doing things that are breaking the law, we don't condone that behavior. We just understand what that means. When you depress communities, when communities are economically depressed, when you don't invest in them, when you have the types of separations in terms of health, wealth, and education in our community, when African-American people make half of what their white counterparts is in this city, and then they're traumatized by the very people who try to protect them, that's what you see. So I'd rather not go into specifically. It's not something that I would tell people to do. It's not something that my faith community and community leaders want people to do. But I certainly do understand that when you're traumatized by the very people who are supposed to protect you, and you live in a community that has such disinvestment, is always at the back of the line. I think I do understand what happened.
And then we have a question from John Croman in the chat. He says, what advice do you have for parents in your district to explain all of this to their?
Well, this is history. And often we like to, excuse my French, whitewash history. We like to play over history. We don't like to tell the truth of what has happened in this country, what has happened in this state, and what has happened in this city. So I would tell parents to be open with their children, to tell them what is going on, to tell them about the historic disinvestment, to tell them about racism, to tell them that it is not okay for the police to kill innocent people. It is time for us to open up. It is time for us, as well as we tell them about Floyd B. Olson and George Washington and Hubert Humphrey and all of the other great history that we have in this state. It is now time for them to tell them about what happens when we don't invest in communities, when we look the other way to racism. It is time for our children, certainly my children, understand. It is time for us to tell them, and hopefully they can join us to make a much more just, a much more a city and a state that has much more equality and equity. It is now time for us to turn away and to act like that was somebody else or something else happened to somebody. That happened to a human being. It has happened far too often to people who look like me. I was just looking at some, research that people have sent me. This is not the first time that this officer has been involved in a violent incident. It is time for us to go through, comb through, get the bad actors out of the police force, right? And to get a police force that is going to look like us. It is time for us to, every dollar we invest in the police force, we should invest 3 in the community. I was just disappointed the other day when the Hennepin County Board listed a Sabathany Community Center and the Circle of Discipline or the Indigenous Peoples Task Force for cuts because of COVID. That sends a signal to our community that we don't care, and it's time for that to stop.
Are there any other questions? I don't see any other ones in the chat or anyone's. Hey, Eric, go ahead. Eric.
Senator, do you have any insight into the culture of the Minneapolis Police Department? No matter who the city council is, no matter who the mayor is, the culture of the department seems so out of step with kind of the liberal ethos of the city and the folks that govern it. What is it about that culture, and how on earth could you change it?
Yeah, it's been like that for a long time, Eric. In 2000, I was a city council aide. I wasn't young, but I was new, and that was my real interaction beyond just being a citizen. This culture of Minneapolis police has been there a long time. I remember my mother telling stories of when she taught me how to walk across to walk across the street on the red and the green light. And then the second thing she told me was that if the police stop, you just do whatever they say so that they don't beat you up. So this has been going on for generations. I think that we need to intervene. I think we need to take a serious look at who's there. I think we need to do things like figure out how members of the police force can live in the community. I think we need to root out the bad apples. I think we need to invest in community. I think that this is a linchpin moment, excuse my French, and that we need to stop. It is too many what we call white thumpers in the Minneapolis Police Department that has been terrorizing people of color.
Is the union part of the solution or part of the problem?
They're the problem. Bob Kroll is the problem. The union is part of the problem. It is everything that they do, the defiance that they have of the chief, continuing to go to trainings that have been deregulated and deemed to be a problem. The union, the police union, is an absolute problem. And if there was a way, and I don't know, because once again, we're trying to look at if there was a way for us to be able to remove the union head or to decertify and get a new union. If there was a legal way that I could do it via legislation, I'd be the first to do it.
Thank you.
Now we have another question in the chat from John Croman. He's asking if the contracts with the Minneapolis PD for SRO officers should be renewed.
I think everything's on the table with the Minneapolis Police Department. I heard that President Gabel with the University of Minnesota is severing her contracts for patrols. I absolutely think that it is time to end that program. We want our children to be safe in school, but we do not want the types of officers and the type of business that we saw displayed. We don't want them anywhere near our children.
All right. Are there any other questions from anyone? I don't see any in the chat or anyone's hands up. All right.
Okay. Thank you, guys. Really appreciate it. Pray for us.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.